So the title of the talk today is Does Political Quota Lead to Development? And it's a empirical work based in India. And just to motivate you, so many countries in the world have some sort of affirmative action which is directed towards different minority communities, and those minority community which have been historically disadvantaged. And so one such affirmative action policy is basically to give quotas to these minority community in the politics. And efficiency of such political quota has been long been debated both in the political circle and also in general population. And so in this paper, I'm asking this question: like, does this political quota improve the socio-economic outcome for these minority communities? So just to motivate you, so this is one of the photo from one of the protests against these affirmative action policy in India. And you can see that in India, so these affirmative action policy exist for different forms of life, which is education, politics, and even promotion in different kind of jobs. And mostly from the upper caste Hindu population, you have some sort of like pushback against these affirmative action policy because they feel that they have been treated harshly, or like they have been treated against by these affirmative action policy. And and one very important empirical result in recent time comes from Bhavnani, where he finds that actually, like, once you take these political quotas away from uh, from uh, from these specific minority groups, then the chances of these minority groups being elected in the parliament almost goes to zero. So it is very important that these political quotas exist in place so that we can maintain proportionate representation in parliament. So just a brief overview of what I do in this paper and what I find. So existing literature so far give us mixed result, and so it requires much more further analysis, and that's what I'm doing. And so what I'm doing here is basically pan-India analysis with highly disaggregated novel data sets. And why is it? I mean, it's important to like study these questions with much more micro level data, because macro level data or macro level analysis may lead to wrong conclusion. For instance, like if discrimination is happening at a very micro level, then we may not capture these kind of discrimination or these kind of actions using macro level data set. So to answer this question, I'm using exogenous variation, which has been introduced by the redistricting of the electoral boundaries in India, and I'm using village level data. So using these village level data also allows me to actually exploit the village level characteristic to see like different sort of heterogeneous treatment analysis. And in this paper, I also show that actually there is an evidence of ethnic favoritism, which has been intended. So it's something not which is negative, but something which is very positive. So main findings in this paper are fourfold. First is that political change normally leads to a favorable outcome. I will define political change in the next slides. And political change itself is important, but what important more than that is like what is the direction of change. So whether like giving political quota or taking political quota, what matters the most. And the third is that the village specific characteristics matter. So political quota itself is not enough. We need something beyond that as well, and I will talk about this as well. And third is that there is persistence of quota mandate. So once you take the quotas away, there is still some persistence of the policies even after it is taken away. So as I said before, that the result so far is mixed. So I will go slightly faster on this slide. So I mean, this paper is contributing to two set of different literature. First is basically caste with political quota, where we have some papers like Zerad, Gulzar, very recent papers, which finds that actually these quota affect positively the life of minority communities. And there are some recent papers as well where they find that there is actually no impact of political quota at all, which is like Jansenius, Chinan Prakash, and Kaltisin Prakash. But one important thing I want to add here is that so far there isn't any paper which gives economic justification for political quotas for scheduled caste. I mean, there are a lot of literature which suggests that for scheduled tribes there is economic justification, but so far there is no economic justification for quotas for scheduled caste. I would I would take the opportunity to claim here that actually in my paper, I do find that there is economic justification. But again, I want to emphasize that there is enough justification from the social justice angle for these quotas to exist anyway. But it is nice to have some economic justification as well. And another set of literature which I am contributing here is about the literature about favoritism. So there is paper by Hodler and Drashki which actually find that leaders, political leaders in general, favor their the place they are from, region of origin, more favorable than the other regions. And beyond that, they also favor, politicians also favor their own ethnicity more than the other ethnicity. But the favoritism literature is mostly seen in a very bad light. Favoritism is considered to be bad. But I want to add slightly different definitions and say that ethnic favoritism is not always bad. It could be good when it is actually the intention of the policy. So giving political quotas for lower caste community in India, it is something which was intended. So, and in this paper, I find that actually intended favoritism could be good, and this is what we find here as well. So my contribution, in one sentence, basically using highly segregated data, and also to provide evidence for ethnic favoritism in a democratic setting, because so far the favoritism literature is focusing more on non-democratic settings. Okay. So just to give you a brief overview of political representation in India, so each constituency is a single member constituency, and the way it works is that each political party nominate a candidate and people vote, and it's plurality, so whichever candidate gets highest number of votes is elected for the constituency. And reservation in India, so as I said before, is basically an affirmative action policy to make sure that there is proportionate representation of different community in the parliament. In India, there are actually three different group of people who have this political quotas. One is scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, and also women. But I am looking at the level of state assembly. So state assembly is only two, which is scheduled caste and scheduled tribe. So I guess just for the sake of completeness, because I'm pretty sure most of you are aware already what are scheduled caste and scheduled tribes. So scheduled caste are basically lower caste Hindu population who have been historically disadvantaged, and their socioeconomic indicator is very low compared to the general population. Similarly, scheduled tribe as well, I mean, they are mostly tribal people whose socioeconomic indicator is very low as well compared to the general population. And just to give you a scale of the share of scheduled caste in the population, so scheduled caste is about 16.6% of India's population, and scheduled tribe is around 8.6% of India's population. So in this paper, I am focusing more on scheduled caste. The focus on is scheduled caste, not scheduled tribe. And one reason is simply because it's much more feasible empirically. Because as you can see on the left, this is the share of scheduled caste at the district level, and on the right, share of scheduled tribe at the district level. And given the first past post political system, it is much more so. So what we see here is basically that scheduled caste are very rarely in majority in any of the constituencies. It's just like one constituency in India where they are in, three constituency out of 4,000 in India where they're in majority. So it is very difficult for scheduled caste to be elected. While this is not the case for scheduled tribes because they're clustered, so if they are 80% of the population, so it's most of the time what happens is that they are elected in the constituencies. So in this paper, I'm exploiting the exogenous variation, which was introduced by the redistricting or delimitation of 2008. So first question you may ask, why this redistricting happened in the first place? So before 2008, the last redistricting happened in 1976. And since, given that it has been more than 30 years, there has been large variation in the size of constituency. So basically, it is the goal of the policymaker to make sure that each constituency is of equal size. But since that more than 30 years have been passed because of urbanization and migration, what has happened that there is a large discrepancy in the size of constituency. And second, the 1976 redistricting was done based on the census of 1971. So at that time, the population share of SC was around 14.6%, but by the time of 2001 census, it has increased to 16.2. So as the goal of representation, goal of reservation is to make sure that the representation is proportionate. So it was needed that the share of scheduled caste has to be adjusted depending on their increase in their share in the population. So this was the main two reasons. First, large discrepancy in the size of constituency, and second, the seats has to be adjusted because the population share of SC has increased. And just to give you, like, I mean, it may not seem a lot because 14.6 and 16.2, but if you look in terms of absolute numbers, so it's quite a lot. It has increased from 80 million to 166 millions. And this redistricting has been done in two steps. So the first step is basically redrawing these constituencies, and second, selecting the constituency which has to be reserved for scheduled caste. And whenever we talk about redistricting, the first question everybody want to ask, okay, was it fair? Was it random? Was it no? And this is, but fortunately here, it is the case that this process was free of gerrymandering, and there is enough evidence to support that this process was very fair. I could talk more about it, why was it fair and not, and then, but I won't like go in deep into that unless you want to know about it. So just to illustrate how the exogenous variation look. So this is the map of the electoral constituency before 2000, before the redistricting. So the red line represent the boundary of the constituencies, and the shaded constituencies, the shaded regions are the constituency which is reserved for scheduled caste. And this is before 2008. This is the same area, so with new electoral boundaries. And the shaded region again is the constituency which is reserved for scheduled caste. So now I'm going to superimpose both of these, and you can see that there is a large variation in terms of the boundaries and also the areas which are now reserved for scheduled caste. And now I will add the village dimension here as well. So now you can see, depending on this variation, a village can take 1 out of 4 different status. So first, that a village could never be part of a reserved constituency, which is white. A village could be reserved before, but not after 2008, which is blue. And a village could be reserved after and not before, which is orange. Or a village could always be part of the reserved constituency, which is the intersection of the two colors. Yeah? Yeah.
So the reserved constituencies are with respect to which elections?
This is all for state assemblies.
What year? Or it's different for different?
So this is different for different years. So right, I mean, for example, in Uttar Pradesh, it wasn't so. Okay, so effective treatment doesn't start in 2008. So in 2008, that is, redistricting was done. So the effective treatment begins with the first election, whenever the first election happened, with the new maps. Yeah. So it is some sort of staggered implementation. This is clear? Okay, so just to let you know the share of these 4 different kind of villages. So around 20% of the villages actually experienced change in their status. Around almost 70% of the villages was not reserved before and not reserved after, which I say here gen to gen. And around 10.5% of the villages were not reserved before but reserved after. And similarly, around 9% of the villages goes from reserved to not reserved, and 11% of the villages was reserved before and reserved after. So data I'm using here is, I start with local area development data to see what's happening at the village level, for which I use the nighttime light density data, and I use so the data is available from 1994 to 2013, but I split the data in 2 and then use the last 10 years of data to do my main analysis, and the first 10 years of data to actually do a placebo test if there is some thing. And I know there is a lot of limitation with nighttime light density data, but it is still considered to be a good proxy for consumption and income at such disaggregated level. And the second data, I complement the nighttime light density result data with the electrification data, which comes from also from the Indian federal government, because it was the federal Indian government with collaboration with the state government, started this policy called RGGVY to actually electrify the villages which was not electrified before. It was launched in 2005. And the third data I'm using is actually the widely used PMGSY data, which was actually Indian federal government plan to actually provide road connectivity to unconnected villages, and it was launched in 2000. The other 2 data I'm using here is, so So these three data is basically available at the village level. So we cannot actually see what's happening inside the village, right? Because the question I'm framing here is that what is happening to scheduled caste, but this data doesn't tell me what's happening to the scheduled caste. It's only telling you what is happening at the village level. But to actually to zoom in, like inside a village, what is happening to SC community within the inside a village, these two data actually allows me to actually zoom into that. So the first data is called DICE, which is I simply call it here education data. This is data of around 1.3 million schools, and it's a panel from 2005 to 17, and I can see in this data the enrollment by different community over time by different grades. And the third is economic census data, which is not a panel, but it is like a snapshot of three different economic census, which is 1995, 2005, and 2014. And in each census year, we have around, in 1998, around 30 million, 42 million, and 59 million enterprises. And we know the caste of the owner of the firm, and also know the size of the enterprise and other covariates as well in this data. So I'm also like using this data to see what is happening to scheduled caste community within a village. And then I'm using other source of data to actually see the demographics for like censuses of 2001 and 11. And my unit of observation is village, and I have around more than 400,000 villages in the analysis. Okay. So this is, for empirical strategy, I'm using very standard diff and diff methodology. So what you see here is basically what is the impact of change in reservation status. So here I defined political change as simply as an union of gen to SC or SC to gen. And y is any of the outcome variable I already talked about. And political change takes a value 1 if the village is either gen to SC or SC to gen type. And post is basically a dummy taking value 1 after the next election with the new maps. And then I have year and village and time effect as well. But this only tells me what is the effect of the change. And as I said before, that the direction of change matters. So what I do is that I bifurcate the different kind of changes. So here gen to SC is a dummy which takes value 1 whenever the village is of the type gen to SC. So village was not reserved before but now reserved, which takes a value 1. Similarly, SC to gen as well, when village was reserved before but not after. So apart from this, I also do like a split specification, which is okay. Yeah. So what I do here is that basically in a split specification, so gen to SC takes a value 1, otherwise 0, and the control group here is basically gen to gen. And and there are other type of villages which I call them like these villages are living reservation. So it takes a value 1 when the villages is going from reserved to unreserved, and the control group is basically to SC. I mean, the split specification and the main specification doesn't make any difference. It is just to make sure that robustness. And why I'm talking about this is simply because so in this specification, my control group is all the villages which doesn't change their status, which is gen to gen and SC to SC. So I just wanted to make sure that there is no concern regarding what is the actual, or like what is the most appropriate control group. Okay. Is this okay or? Okay. So the first set of result here is basically, so in the first 4 column, what I show you is the effect of political quotas on night lights. So political change, as I defined, is just the union of gen to SC and SC to gen. So what is the effect of just village changing its status, right? And I mean, it's not significant, but we can see like that the direction of change is positive. So political change in general suggests that it may lead to favorable outcomes. So and gen to SC, as I said, so basically, I mean, in column 3, what we basically see here is that once a village goes from unreserved to reserved, we see that the average night light increases significantly there. And in column 4, I add a lot of controls to make sure that it is not driven by any of the covariates there. And we find that the results are still significant, and yeah.
The control here is gen to gen and SC to SC.
No, so Control here is both, yeah.
Both.
Yeah, Gen to Gen and SE to SE. And the in the split specification, magnitude differs, but it's almost the same result, I would say.
And it's higher?
In the split specification, it is, we can just say, no? We can just wait. So it is lower in the split specification, but it is still positive and significant.
Um,
So, okay, so what is happening here is that I am forcing the mean to be like the combination of SC to SC and Gen to Gen,
Yep.
right? And in the split specification, the control group mean gets slightly above,
Higher.
right? So, but it's still, I mean, the magnitude differs a bit in different specification. And also if you see, like, there is a drop in the magnitude from going from column 3 to column 4, because in column 4 there is a very heavy control where I'm controlling for share of scheduled caste in the villages.
And the reservation is random. Is entirely random, or is it?
I mean, reservation is random. Yeah, I would argue it is. Yeah, but it is driven by the share of its scheduled caste at the constituency level, but not at the
That
village
is
level.
correlated with tons of other stuff, no?
Yeah,
So can you show us some sort of balance tables?
I do have balance tables somewhere. So this is, yeah. So this is the balance table in terms of different type of villages. When you see, like, Gen to SC and Gen to Gen are slightly more developed villages, while SC dominated villages are not that developed relatively. But the differences, I mean, it's not that much, I would say. I mean, Gen to, if you look at Gen to Gen and SC to SC, then you can see that there is stark differences. But from Gen to SC and SC to Gen, I mean, the village type 2 and village type 3, they're quite similar. So the villages which are getting the reservation and villages which are losing the reservation is quite similar.
Like, I would have imagined
Yeah.
a more formal this thing where you want to show that the differences are not statistically significant.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe to convince that that you're actually picking up like the reservation effect.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm controlling for, I mean, so the controls I have here is quite heavy, I would
Yeah.
suggest. So, I mean, even if, like, there are some differences at the village level, let's say, or type of villages level, and I would argue that the controls are taking up a lot of those aspects, but I can still have some sort of linear trend.
So like
Introduced.
how is the magnitude changing when you provide controls?
Mm. It goes down. So the control is the fourth column with the controls.
Oh, so it was 1.44.
Yeah.
0.144 and like 0.1%.
Yeah. And for other outcome variables, it's also affect quite a lot. I mean, so the magnitude goes down quite a lot because these controls are, I would argue, it's quite heavy on it because.
Yeah, but like in your split sample, it goes to like 0.0000 or something like that. So I would be worried that. Yeah, 0.09.
Yeah. So
It's a
it
lot.
goes down by around 20-25%,
Yeah,
right?
so that's what I'm saying. Then maybe like
But this is specific to this night light result. I mean, in this other outcome variable, it doesn't goes that much. But I mean, yeah, because I mean, I'm using night light to just motivate. Like there is this overall development, like, you know, because it's not actually capturing also like what's happening to the scheduled caste community inside the village, right?
No, for sure.
Yeah,
But
so-
still, like, just that
Mhm.
on the aggregate,
Yeah.
the magnitude is differing so much
Mm-hmm.
when you're changing the specification makes me little. But
Mm-hmm.
or we can talk about it.
Yeah, we can take about it. Yeah. Okay, so from column to column 5 to 8, it is the same sort of analysis, but I'm using the different years of the data. So what I do here is basically I just give a placebo treatment to the same village in different time. For example, if a village was treated, let's say in 2009, in the main analysis period. Then I just give the same village the treatment in 1999, and I see that actually in the placebo data there's nothing moving there actually. So this is like the event study analysis of the nightlight density result, and we see that so the blue line is basically those villages which are going in the treatment, and the gray is the villages which are leaving the treatment, and we see that after like 1 year of these new after 1 or 2 year of treatment, there is like a sharp jump in the effect of and this result is robust to Chase-Martin specifications as well. And this is the event study for the placebo data which is from 1994 to 2003, and then that we see that there's nothing moving there, it's just all flat.
So basically,
Yeah.
like I would show the previous graph first
Mhm.
and then the tables.
Yeah.
Because like my other question was about parallel trends.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
I mean that's just like so consoling, I guess. That
Yeah, then the table, yeah, I agree. Yeah. So what I want to show here is actually, so as I talked about it earlier, that I want to also see the heterogeneity among the villages, right? So what I'm doing here is that basically I split the sample in two, and I divide the villages in terms of SC share, so basically above median and below median. So villages with high level of SC share, which is around like 33% on average, and villages with low level of SC share, which is around 5% of the treatment. So what we see here is that it's basically I'm just plotting the coefficient from the table we saw, and this is like the gen to SC coefficient, so villages going in the treatment, and SC to gen, which is village going out of the treatment. And what we see here is that the positive impact we saw earlier is completely driven by the type of villages which has high SC share, while the villages which has reservation but still not that high SC share, which is the green coefficient, we see that there is actually no impact. I understand that these confidence intervals are intersecting each other, but it still gives us some clue of what might be going in the background. And it makes sense in terms that like, so I mean, as an SC politician, it makes sense because I mean, the politicians are aware like who are going to be their main vote bank, and then they're targeting different policies in this way that, yeah. And for villages going out of treatment, SC to gen, we see that there is no such heterogeneity there. It's just all same for everyone. Okay, so the column from 1 to 4 is the same from the last table, but column 5 to 8 here I have is the electrification data from electrification outcome from the government. So basically it was basically government electrifying a lot of villages. So if we are seeing a lot of night lights, it's coming from somewhere, and this table suggests that it's coming from electrification of the villages, and it's almost similar, and there is the same pattern for electrification as well, that the result is driven by those villages which have high SC share. So the next outcome variable I want to present here is basically the enrollment, SC enrollment. So it's the same specification, and I want to focus. I want you to focus on column 3. Without any, so this result is without any controls. So it is just basically the impact of reservation on gen to SC and SC to gen, of course with all the necessary fixed effects. And we see that the SC enrollment in the villages goes up by around around 2.3% compared to the mean. While we also see that the villages which are actually losing reservation, the SC enrollment also goes up. But in column 4, I control for SC share because it might be the case that what we are seeing here is basically a demographic trend. Because if you remember in the beginning, I talked about the fact that SC share is increasing over time in the population. So it might be the fact that these enrollment results are driven by these trends in the enrollment. And in the column 4, I control for the share of SC, and we see that of course the magnitude goes down. It's around 1.8% of the mean, if my math is not failing me. But we don't see any impact on the villages which are now losing the reservation. So there is no, so it's not a bad result. It's actually quite a good result because normally people will expect it to go down. I mean, once a village loses its reservation, people will expect it to go down, but there is persistence of the quota mandate. So whatever the trend was there before, it still continues to be there. But the highlight here is that the enrollment of SC goes up when there is reservation for SC in the village.
This is enrollment in probability terms.
Enrollment not in probability terms, so it's basically in terms of enrollment in absolute numbers.
So how are you interpreting the magnitude?
Uh,
How you,
so okay, so just to clarify, so I calculated the share of SC in each school, right? So I have total and SC share.
shares.
So share of SC in these villages is around like 23.5%, and then it goes to it increases like the share. Yeah, I should also I guess at one point report the result for total enrollment, just absolute numbers rather than just the share. Yeah. I also do the heterogeneity analysis here, but interestingly, what we see here is that the effect is not higher in the villages with high SC share, but effect is higher in those villages which have low SC share. And here, I interpret this result as like some sort of discrimination channel here, because as many of you might be aware that in rural settings in India at least, it's very difficult for SC community to access the public goods. And one such public good is actually education, because there is still a large persistence of untouchability and such evil norms. And so basically what I'm suggesting here is that if there is like low SC presence in a village or in a locality, then SC community may feel a bit more costly, or it might be more difficult for them to actually access these schools, because there is more pushback from the upper caste community for them to actually access the school. But if like the SC share is, let's say, much more significant, around 30, 40%, and it is still there's still like some sort of formidable force, and they can actually fight back for their own their right and access those public goods. So it might be the fact that now that the village are getting SC representative, so they have like a role model, or they have somebody who can actually protect their rights. So now the villages which have low SC share are now more aware of their rights, and more aware and more motivated to actually go and access the education. So this is still like a working theory, and I am thinking of like complementing it with some survey result or whatever to see like if this is the case or not. Okay. So the third, the last outcome variable I'm looking at here is basically the data from the economic census. So the column 1 shows you what's happening to the SC firms, right? So I calculate I calculate the number of SC firms by villages, or to be more precise, by census units, because I matched all these economic census firms to the census villages. And what we see here is that once a village get reservation, then the size so the number of SC firms increases by around 1. And not just that, so I also calculate the number of workers of SC firm. So I want to emphasize that these worker doesn't have to be SC. So we just know in the census that whether this firm is SC owned or not, and what is the size of the workforce. So those workforce could be from any community. So what we also see, okay, in this is that actually once the village get reservation, the size of SC firm also increases by around two more employees. And it's significant because if you look at the mean, it's around 10. Here, so it increases by around 20%. So the result, so this table here suggests that actually there is this impact of reservation on SC entrepreneurial skill, both on the intensive and the extensive margin. And column 3 to 6 is just the same analysis, but with a split specification to show that it's robustness over. Okay. And the last set of results, which I'm still not very sure of, is basically result using the road construction and road upgradation data. And what we see here is that actually both like getting the reservation and going out of reservation leads to positive outcomes. So basically there are more and more better roads, so there are more and more road upgradation, but the results are stronger for those villages which is getting the reservation, and slightly less in magnitude for the villages which are losing the reservation. And I mean, yeah, and so I mean, so basically, I mean, I was puzzled because initially I was expecting there should be no impact on SC to Gen villages in this, given that the other results suggest that. But I talked to some of the people who were involved in this policy, and they told me because the nature of this road upgradation is such that actually politicians want to be seen as somebody who is doing a lot of work, and these politicians, these politicians who are now in Gen 2 civil are relatively new politicians, relatively young politicians, and they want to make more and more political goodwill, whatever, and they want to be seen as somebody who's doing a lot of work. And the most accessible thing they could do whenever they come and take into office is basically just make road upgradation, because it is just a one phone call away. In contrast to making a new road, which is a very, very costly thing to do, not in just terms of money, but also in terms of time. But for this, you just make a call, a pothole in a road, it could be done in 1 week. So every politician, especially the new ones who want to make goodwill, is doing it. But still, the politicians in the Gen 2 SC villages are doing it much more than the other politicians. And again, the same set of heterogeneity. It's happening more in those villages which are heavily dominated by SC. And I want to show you this table as well. Sorry, this graph as well. So this is event study for new road construction. So overall, like the regression output of this analysis is that it says that once a village gets reservation, there is negative impact. So there are less probability of a village getting a road if the village is newly reserved. But once I did like this event study specification, like just to see what's going on here, and what I see is that it becomes positive, but only after one electoral cycle. So, and it makes sense because these politicians are relatively new, and they don't have any bureaucratic experience or less bureaucratic experience compared to other politicians. And getting this new road done, because it takes around 3 to 4 years to, like, from the beginning, like, of getting the sanctioned road and like the tender process and everything, it takes quite long time, and it's also very expensive to do it. So there is positive impact, but it takes some time. But interestingly, I don't have a table here, but I'm still doing this analysis, running these regressions. Is that basically, if in the Gen 2 SC villages, if these politicians are incumbent, so if they have prior political experience, then the result is positive. So you do see that it differs. So the result differs whether this is a new politician or old politician. So if it is old politician with prior experience, they do this thing quite faster. So you see that this actually goes up just immediately in 1 or 2 years after the change is implemented. But for new politician or for over politician, it takes some time to kick in.
How many elections does this have?
For some states, 1 electoral cycles, but for some states, I have 2 electoral cycles. So I'm also trying to exploit, like, in the same state, if there is like what's happening in the next electoral cycle.
Yeah, because in those places where, but this graph contains only 1 electoral cycle.
Yeah, this graph contains 1 electoral cycle.
Yeah, so like, this seems like the re-election is just.
Yeah, there could also be just, but I mean, so one thing to keep in mind here is that the election is different for different years, for different states, right? So in the analysis which is not here, I'm doing with the politicians' data, using politician data as well. It doesn't suggest that it is driven by the electoral cycle itself. It is mostly driven by the experience. So if you have experience, it doesn't matter. I mean, you start immediately after. Like the result starts to show up immediately after you are elected. So far what I'm doing right now in this project is basically integrating the politician's biography, like their crime record, their education, their political experience, to actually show that these results are heavily dependent not just on reservation, but also like what kind of politicians actually comes in or goes out as a result of reservation, and then these politician characteristics plays heavy role in terms of the result and the magnitude we see. Okay, so just to conclude, what we see here is that basically political quotas leads to higher local development, which I measure using the night lights, higher school enrollment for SC students in the newly reserved constituencies, higher entrepreneurial activity among SC, higher growth of SC owned enterprises, and also higher probability of road upgradation, higher new road construction as well, but with slight delay. And most interestingly, what we find here is that reservation itself is not enough. What we need on top of that is also that the villages have significant SC share in the population for the effects to kick in. Yeah. Thanks a lot. Yeah, it was really amazing. Yeah.